the scientific environment that we're in today is changing. You know, the frontiers of science are changing, and you know, we start with Newtonian physics, where matter is primary. When we talk about primacy here, we're going to talk about primacy of a number of different things, but primacy just means what comes first. You know, what controls. Okay, and the Newtonian physics model that we've all learned in school is that matter is primary. It's classical mechanics, okay? Concerned with physical laws describing the motion of bodies under the action of a system of forces, okay? It's an ancient study. It's one of the oldest and largest subjects in science, and it's what we've inherited from the body of science that came before us. Okay, it's the best way to describe, I think, Newtonian physics. Matter is, everything is matter. You learn, you know, you've got the chart of the elements and how you know, atoms interact and form molecules, and you know, everything you learned back in elementary school and junior high science. Okay, and what the textbooks are full of today. Now, you know, in the 20s roughly, and increasingly to this day, we started to discover quantum physics. And in quantum physics, we're looking at a primacy of energy instead of a primacy of matter. You know, the easiest way to demonstrate this is probably to look at the double slit experiment. You guys have probably seen this before, but it's always worth looking at again. And it demonstrates basically that there's an energetic field and a dependence on an observer. Now, I was going to do this slide, but I think we've got a clip that comes from What the Bleep that describes the double slit experiment. Apologize if it's going to be a little bit choppy on here. It'll be clear on the recording of this, but it may be a little choppy as we upload it and stream it. But PJ, let's go ahead and run the double slit experiment video. And this comes from What the Bleep.
And here we are, the granddaddy of all quantum weirdness, the infamous double slit experiment. To understand this experiment, we first need to see how particles, or little balls of matter, act. If we randomly shoot a small object, say a marble, at the screen, we see a pattern on the back wall where they went through the slit and hit. Now, if we add a second slit, we would expect to see a second band duplicated to the right. Now, let's look at waves. The waves hit the slit and radiate out, striking the back wall with the most intensity directly in line with the slit. The line of brightness on the back screen shows that intensity. This is similar to the line the marbles make. But when we add the second slit, something different happens. If the top of one wave meets the bottom of another wave, they cancel each other out. So now there is an interference pattern on the back wall. Places where the two tops meet are the highest intensity, the bright lines, and where they cancel, there is nothing. So, when we throw things, that is, matter, through two slits, we get this, two bands of hits. And with waves, we get an interference pattern of many bands. Good so far. Now, let's go quantum. An electron is a tiny, tiny bit of matter, like a tiny marble. Let's fire a stream through one slit. It behaves just like the marble, a single band. So, if we shoot these tiny bits through two slits, we should get, like the marbles, two bands. What? An interference pattern. We fired electrons, tiny bits of matter through. But we get a pattern like waves, not like little marbles. How? How could pieces of matter create an interference pattern like a wave? It doesn't make sense. But physicists are clever. They thought, maybe those little balls are bouncing off each other and creating that pattern. So they decide to shoot electrons through one at a time. There is no way they could interfere with each other. But after an hour of this, the same interference pattern is seen to emerge. The conclusion is inescapable. The single electron leaves as a particle, becomes a wave of potentials, goes through both slits, and interferes with itself to hit the wall like a particle. But mathematically, it's even stranger. It goes through both slits, and it goes through neither. And it goes through just one, and it goes through just the other. All of these possibilities are in superposition with each other. But physicists were completely baffled by this. So they decided to peek and see which slit it actually goes through. They put a measuring device by one slit to see which one it went through and let it fly. But the quantum world is far more mysterious than they could have imagined. When they observed, the electron went back to behaving like a little marble. It produced a pattern of two bands, not an interference pattern of many. The very act of measuring or observing which slit it went through meant it only went through one, not both. The electron decided to act differently, as though it was aware it was being watched. And it was here that physicists stepped forever into the strange, never world of quantum events. What is matter? Marbles or waves? And waves of what? And what does an observer have to do with any of this? The observer collapsed the wave function simply by observing.
Okay. So it's probably not new to anyone on here. If it is, either way, it's always very interesting to look at. The wave function, the waveform collapses when observed into matter. Otherwise, it's a field of energy behaving like a wave instead of an atom or a molecule or a particle of any sort. So if Newtonian physics is primacy of matter, quantum physics is primacy of energy. And it's this wave of energy or this field of energy. And this is shown in the other primary or central, maybe I should say, experiment of quantum physics as well, which is the measurement problem. And the measurement problem basically says the more you try to measure the exact location of the nucleus of an atom, the less you can measure its size. And the radius from the nucleus to the electron. And the more you try to measure the size of an atom, it becomes impossible to locate the nucleus or the center of the atom. So, and basically you cannot measure the size and location of an atom and at the same time, and it's because atoms aren't really what they look like in the textbook. The textbook picture of the nucleus with the electrons spinning around it, and it looks like a tidy package. But it really doesn't look like that until it's fully observed. So it's actually more of a field of energy until one observes and measures, and then even in doing so, it's very difficult to get both the location and the size. So what we have is a field of energy that we're involved as observers. We're involved in converting to matter. And as we'll discuss a little later, I mean, energy is about frequency, and what you get in terms of matter has to do with the frequency of the energy. But I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. All right, let's look at biology. So the central dogma of Western medicine is the primacy of genetics. Okay, we're taught in schools that genes are the molecules that control who you are. DNA determines your makeup and your potential by passive inheritance. It controls you. Okay, we're given this central dogma from Watson and Crick that this control is accomplished by the flow of genetic information from the DNA to the RNA to the protein. And this makes you who you are. You are the protein, basically. I mean, you have DNA and RNA in you, but you're made up of proteins. So in this view, you cannot influence the DNA because the flow of information is unidirectional. It's from the DNA through the RNA to the protein. One direction. Okay, now if Western medicine has bought this hook, line, and sinker for a long time. But if we buy it, then you are a consequence of your genes and you cannot affect your DNA. So you don't get to vote. Therefore, you're a victim of heredity. Here you are a victim in a world where we're trying to get out of victimhood, right? So the good news is that the central dogma was just that. It was dogma. Dogma means it's not scientific fact, it's just accepted belief. It's a belief system or a set of beliefs accepted almost as if it were fact, but never scientifically proven. Okay, yet this is the basis for Western biology and medicine today. So here we all are, victims. And since victims need help, we turn to the pharmaceutical industry to cure us. Now, the pharmaceutical industry is the leading funding source for biological research. Do you think they have a vested interest in exploring truth beyond the central dogma of the primacy of DNA? I doubt it. I doubt it. See, if we believe DNA controls us and we're victims of our genetics, don't we make them a lot more money than if we start to examine what the truth really is? So we learned that science has been used as a method of control of the population, not at all unlike the fear propaganda control methods, the control through statutes and code, control by the centralized banking system. So who's going to fund biological research to advance Western medicine? Not the pharmaceutical companies. And what is the truth if we start to look at some of the experiments that have actually been done that show that this central dogma is not true? What is the truth that comes out of that? Well, let's look at it. Bruce Lipton, PhD, a molecular biologist, one of the earliest and leading researchers of stem cells. He was one of the founders of the area of study known as epigenetics. He was a professor at Stanford for many years of molecular biology. He was onto the truth like 45 years ago. In the late 60s, he was working with stem cells, and stem cells are proteins. Okay, they're embryonic cells, and if you put them in a specific environment, in a petri dish, they grow muscle. If you put the same stem cells in a different dish with a different environment and a different culture medium, they grow fat. And if you place them in yet a different culture medium, they grow bone. The same stem cells. So what's the significance of this? The environment is providing information which is involved in selecting the gene activity. Okay, the proteins are more affected by their environment than by their DNA. This is true of any stem cells from any source of DNA. The DNA is a blueprint for a protein, not a controlling factor of outcome. The controlling factor is the environment. So this central dogma of Western medicine, the primacy of DNA, is not scientific fact at all, and in fact it's false. Genetics is not the key to controlling the outcome, epigenetics is. Now, just to briefly define epigenetics, epi means over or above. Epigenetics is therefore the study of what's over and above the DNA, what controls the DNA. Despite the central dogma of biology that we're controlled by genes, the control was never in the genes at all. The gene is controlled by signals from the environment. Thus, our condition is not determined by DNA. That's just wrong. It's determined by environment. The technical name for the process is signal transduction. The skin or the membrane of a cell passes the environmental signals through to the DNA in the nucleus to tell the DNA what to do. And this is done by receptor proteins and effector proteins. If you change the environmental signals, you change the behavior of the DNA. Okay, now this is not guesswork. It's established, peer-reviewed scientific fact. Okay, primacy of DNA is incorrect dogma. The truth is primacy of environment. Dr. Bruce Lipton estimates that the actual figures for relevance are 5% genetics and 95% environment. 5% of people are born with genetic defects that cause abnormalities to complicate their lives. Usually, these defects are apparent at birth. 95% of your health and abilities are a product of your environment. Studies have been conducted with adopted children in families with quote-unquote genetic tendencies toward cancer. The adopted children get the allegedly genetic cancer. How's that? Therefore, the tendency is not genetic, but learned or acquired in their environment. Children with an alleged genetic history of cancer, when adopted by a family without a history of cancer, don't develop the cancer. Folks, you're a product of your environment. Quit blaming genetics and a fear and victim mentality and start creating the environment you want. Now, this is actually great news, okay? It takes us out of victimhood and into creation. So let's look at this further and see what else we can realize. Okay, so if epigenetics is the primacy of environment, manifestation is the primacy of perception. Okay, we're going to take this further. As you can see, we're rolling through one theory onto the next to try to get to the highest belief system here. Okay, perception is what it's called when your body reads external and internal environmental signals. Okay, it's that signal transduction. The placebo effect shows the effect of perception in biology. When someone is given a placebo and it cures them. How did that happen? Well, it happened not because of any chemical cure from a pharmaceutical company. It happened because they believed it would happen, and therefore it did. Okay? From quantum physics, we also understand the importance of the observer. Observing and perceiving affect both living cells and particles of non-living matter, as we saw in the double-slit experiment, and we see in the measurement problem. Okay? Whether we're talking about the behavior of energy becoming matter or the behavior of DNA, it involves the mind. Mind is interpretation. It's not just signal and response, or not just external environment, but the interpretation of that environment that determines what you get. So the mind is going to process the environmental signals and then release the chemicals into your blood that indicate what the mind's interpretation of that environment is, right? The mind is a signal interpreter and a signal producer. It matches the incoming signals with interpretation and produces the chemical signals that actually control the protein production. So how your mind perceives your environment is therefore more important, in fact, than the environment itself. So now we have primacy of perception. Okay? Said another way, your mind, by interpreting your environment, creates the apparent environment that the cells respond to, regardless of what the raw environment actually looks like. So, while environment is more important than genetics, perception is more important than environment. Primacy of perception. Now, regardless of genetics or environment, you get what your mind perceives and believes, at least in terms of your own biological health and abilities. The chemicals released when your mind is in love produce an environment of healthy cell growth. The chemicals released in fear stop cell growth. Okay, the fear signal halts cell growth for good reason. It's to conserve energy for fight or flight. Okay, there's no sense growing right now because we're in a panic situation when we gotta either fight or get out of here, right? So the message from a fear-based mindset is not cell growth. Okay, it's the stop, it's the complete halt of cell growth for fight or flight. If you create an environment of love, you'll flourish. If you allow yourself to live in an environment of fear, you'll be a victim at the cellular level. You are the master of your genetics. But what about the mind's effect on external matter? That's just the body we were talking about, right? It turns out love is the key there as well. We saw from the double slit experiment that primacy of matter is incorrect. Matter is a manifestation of energy. Energy is primary. Everything is energy, and it shows up as matter only when observed. Energy is all about resonance, okay? It's frequency of vibration. It's waves, and the frequency of the wave determines what form the energy takes and what you get. Love is the highest frequency vibration, and we know this somewhat from science and also, though, from mystical experience. Okay, love is the true nature of primordial energy. Love is what's true in the universe. It's what's most true. It's the source, okay? It is spirit. It is the very nature of primordial energy and the source of all creation. We're all one, and the universe is holographic in nature. Now, this simply means that all of the information of the universe is in each individual part of the universe. Okay, your body contains all of the information of the universe. That's what holographic means. Okay, so if you operate from love, you're growing the universe with your mind. It's a pretty interesting concept, right? You're powerfully manifesting reality if you come from a position of love. You're creating the material realm. If you operate from fear, you're having little or no effect on creation, and you'll just take what comes. There's a discussion in the Tibetan Book of the Dead about the goal of man. The goal is to consciously control the energy of your universe and thereby control all aspects of your reality. And we're talking about thousands of years ago. This knowledge was available and printed for all to read. Now, to do so starts with a love frequency and powerful manifestation. To operate on that frequency, the key is to do what excites you. Notice the difference between low frequency of sadness, anger, or fear, and the high vibration of love and excitement. Okay? Do what excites you to do it. Do it from the emotion of love, and you will create whatever you want. So I conclude and put forth for your consideration and acceptance that in this discussion of what's primary, the truth is primacy of what excites you. Okay? Primacy of what makes you operate on a high frequency. Love and excitement. Okay? This is where you'll find what you're looking for, what you're capable of creating, and the power to manifest it in your life. Do what excites you. Follow your passion. Do it from a position of unconditional love. Let go of fear. operate at the highest frequency, and thereby create your own environment and control your reality. By being the frequency you prefer to be, on the path you'd prefer to be on, you will experience what you prefer to experience. And that's creative control.